Hey guys, Amazing Ampharos here with part 1 of what's going to be a playthrough of Final Fantasy IV The Afteryears. This is a Final Fantasy game that kinda went under the radar compared to most games, but I actually feel like it's a pretty strong title. The story plays it real safe. It mostly is just sticking in the shadow of the original game, but it does its job and has just so many nods to the original that if you're a classic Final Fantasy fan, it's hard not to have a grin on your face half the time you're playing this game. And the combat engine especially, I think, is really impressive in this title, because it takes the basics of what made Final Fantasy IV fun, and it uses modern design sensibilities to really just polish that system to be so much better than really it ever had been. So if you haven't played this game, I definitely recommend giving it a shot. And if you're still not convinced, well, you're going to have a whole lot of gameplay to watch to make up your mind. I'll be playing this on the WiiWare version. There's also a PSP version, and it was originally a phone game, but that's only in Japan. The biggest difference is that the Prologue, Theodore's Tale, and Kane's Tale are all rolled into one main quest here. I'm going to be playing it largely like it was the PSP version, in that I'm going to do the Prologue and Theodore's first, because those are natural, but I'm going to break off the main quest after I complete Theodore's half of it, because Kane's half of the main quest contains significant spoilers for many of the other things. That might not make sense to you if you're unfamiliar with this game. What that really is about is that this game was originally released as an episodic game. Every few weeks they'd release a new tale that went through largely the same events of the game, but from the perspectives of different characters in different parts of the world doing different things. Eventually you got to see what was going on in the world from everyone's perspective, and it all came together where you could import a bunch of those different save files from different characters into a ridiculously massive finale. In terms of this prologue here, we're pretty much going to be following Theodore for a while. Theodore, of course, is the son of Cecil and Rosa. He has some serious self-confidence issues, but he's actually a pretty interesting character. Gameplay-wise, he's a funny sort of compromise character, because while Cecil could always use white magic, for practical purposes, he was just an all-out physical character. And of course, Rosa was the white maid. Theodore, being their son, is supposed to be like a compromise between the two. That really doesn't sound that workable, because either you're a good healer or you're not, either you're strong enough to be a physical frontliner or you're not. But he really does actually toe the line pretty well. He's not quite as, physically tough and bulky as the other physical characters, but he's good enough. He's not a good enough healer to be a primary healer, but he's just good enough that he's able to function as a support healer, and he'll have to be a primary healer in a couple of boss fights. And he's strong enough not to make it miserable. Now here, starting off as well, you also saw he was forced to stay in the inn and had the lunar phase shift. Lunar phases are one of the two big new features this game's combat engine. The basic gist of it is that under any lunar phase, one of the 4 types of actions, either physical attacks, white magic, black magic, or special commands like jump, are either powered up or powered down by about 25%. The game forces us here to use Full Moon, which is plus black magic and minus physical attack. The black magic doesn't help Theodore out, but it sure does help us out in that the physical attacks are weaker. So we have to deal with a lot less damage coming our way. Since Theodore's starting at level 1, that just makes things safer. And I'm going to equipment optimize and play with some settings here so battles go faster, and Theodore's able to fight a little better. Starting at level 1 makes Theodore really weak. But he'll catch up pretty quickly. And he has to. Because he's going to have to stand on his own really soon. And in this fight, we're going to get introduced to the other major feature of this game, which is bands. What bands are special command attacks in which you combine the abilities of two characters to get a unison attack. In this case, we're going to see Vibra Edge, which is just a simple attack all enemies with physical attack command. And while you guys, if you've watched our other videos, know I really enjoy running some random encounters, I'm going to fight a little more than I usually would, because Theodore really needs to catch up. Like right here, I'm losing Biggs and Wedge. Not forever, but having to fight as such a limited character is not too bad since these monsters are weak, but I am going to have to fight a boss fight on my own. And at level 2, it's pretty much completely unwinnable. Even if I squeak through it, this character is going to have to be able to win fights later on down the road. So I'm just going to fight on the way, and my ultimate goal is to be around level 7 for this boss. That does require gaining 5 levels, but again, starting at level 1 is going to go really quickly. You also may have noticed I cranked the battle speed up to 1. I did this because battle speed is largely a matter of personal preference. Cranking it up makes the game a little harder, but also makes it run a lot faster. And the difficulty versus fun trade-off, I feel, very strongly favors high battle speed. That high potion is an excellent drop. You also have the option of setting the ATB mode between wait and active. I have it on the default, which is wait, which means whenever I go into a menu like the magic menu or the item menu, action stops until I pick something. Putting it into active makes the game faster paced, yes, and is also a big skill test, but it makes the game a lot harder, and at the levels I intend to do a lot of things, it probably makes some of them pretty much impossible. This game also does have one downside compared to a lot of Final Fantasies, in that it has no concept of cursor memory. So when I want to select things that are deep buried in menus, I'm really putting myself at a disadvantage if I use ATB mode action. None of the enemies in this dungeon are a threat at all. If I get unlucky with groups, I might have to heal Theodore before the boss, but even if I do, it doesn't really matter. Level 8's more than enough. I'm running through the rest of them. Now, this boss is kind of a level check in that if I just mash attack at level 8 or higher, I'm pretty much guaranteed to win. I might have to heal once at level 6 or 7. If your level's much lower than that, you're not going to win. Theodore's really limited. Cure doesn't heal nearly enough in battle to be useful, so you can only heal with the potions you've got, and any high potion drops with the blood heal. That went very quickly and smoothly. I must have gotten good damage rolls on all my attacks. And here we're going to get introduced to Theodore's unique command, which is Awaken. Awaken gives you super high stats for 3 turns, and fully heals you, but after it expires during battle, you drop to single-digit HP. I don't really find Awaken all that useful in general, but for its tutorial purpose here, it did its job. Now that I've denied Emblem, I just have to backtrack out of the dungeon. Since I'm done fighting, it's going to be a very quick affair. And you'll notice there when I ran, I dropped a little money. That's a consistent mechanic in this game, just like in Final Fantasy IV. When you run, you have about a 50-50 chance of dropping money. And if you drop money, how much you drop depends on the level of the enemy. In this dungeon, since the enemies are very weak, I only drop single-digit amounts of gil, which is pretty trivial. When I start fighting stronger encounters, the amounts I drop get large very fast. And I'm going to have to do a lot of planning later on, to try to maximize the value of my resources, while accepting that I can lose my money at any time. And Biggs and Wedge are about to leave the party, so I'm going to steal all their stuff. That's a theme in this game. You have a lot of temporary characters, and you really want to just take everything they own. Because when characters disappear forever, they take any equipment with them. But they always come with equipment, so if you loot them at strategic times, you can end up getting a lot of extra stuff. In Biggs and Wedge case, it's just going to be extra money. But down the road with other characters, I'm really going to help myself out a lot with this equipment. Of course, I do have to fight a boss fight here with Biggs and Wedge, even though they have no equipment. But with the right strategy, this is a really easy boss fight. So it doesn't really matter whether they have equipment or not. And here we have a scene very reminiscent of classic Final Fantasy IV, in which the Red Wings get attacked by monsters on the way back to Bear. Except instead of just watching the fight, we get to participate in this one. The basic strategy here, as simple as it sounds, is just building a fire. Theodore can help out with physical attacks, but he's not really that big of a deal. Wedge has Cura, so if my characters ever get in any sort of trouble, he can easily keep my health. A little bit of a deviation from standard Final Fantasy IV, things don't go quite so well after beating the monsters. But before we worry about Theodore's fate too much, we're going to see exactly what's going on with this smoke rising from Bear insurrection, and get a view on some of our old favorites from the last year. We're going to be taking command of Cecil for a while and seeing what we can do about all these monsters that decided to attack Bear. Not to spoil of the events that are going to play out, but all the characters we get in this little section are temporary. Even when we get these characters much later in the game, they join as completely new characters with new equipment, new levels. So we gain nothing by leveling up, and we gain nothing by improving what these characters have. However, they do share an inventory with Theodore, so any equipment I take from them or items I gather will help them out. These characters are a lot stronger than them and have a lot better stuff. So before I'm done with this section, I'm going to be sure to leave to my advantage. And Cecil might as well be a good. His health is just so high and his defense is so good that I could do anything against these monsters. For those wondering how long this somewhat boring display of how powerful this temporary character is goes on, there are 4 forced encounters and then a sequence of final fights. It's a bit more interesting, especially with what I'm doing. That was forced encounter 2, which is the longest one. This is not forced, I can just run. Sadly, I lost 60 kills in that. And that remedy at the top is the only item in the basement, so I don't need to explore the rest of Odin's old time. This one's the most interesting one, because this enemy has a somewhat poor but real chance of dropping the Giant's Club, which is a very nice piece of equipment that will serve Theodore's party well for pretty much the entirety of the main quest. I'm not going to reset if I don't get it, but I'll have a big smile on my face if I get it. Nope, didn't get it. And that hidden passage for those wondering doesn't open right now, so I'm not bypassing items, they're just not there. Now here's where things get a bit more interesting, because Rosa decides that she's not going to leave us behind one way or another. She's no more permanent than this version of Cecil, but she'll let us have a lot more interesting fight, both in terms of the tactics of having more characters, and because she gives me a lot more stuff to steal. But before we can get into that, it's time for us to get a peek around the world at how people are going to react to the sudden appearance of the world's second moon again. This is kind of like a sneak peek of a lot of what you're going to see later on. Because all of these characters are going to be played in the various tales. But that's a little ways down the road. For now, we need to focus on getting through Cecil's little prologue section, and we're going to have to spend some time with Theodore before we dive into those tales. So let's complete our little merry prologue band and get our third temporary character, our friend Sid. Now I'm going to do something a little bold, and that is take all of this stuff. I'm going to leave Cecil his shield and weapon, and Sid his weapon, but otherwise I'm taking everything they both have. I'm also going to move Kira to the top of the line. The thing is, after this series of fights is done, I lose these characters. I'll have a chance to steal Cecil's equipment in his hand, but I won't be able to steal any armors. That was really scrubby of me, I'm sorry. This first fight's pretty much a freebie, so you can just do whatever. The main important thing is just to make sure to have a lot of health when you come out of it. Now the second one, on the other hand, requires some real tactics. Because the Ottoman there just repeatedly uses Doom and then haste. And using it on Rosa is the worst possible way. Drawing slow on the group reduces the rate at which you have to face that. Slow is extremely powerful at this game, and you'll see me use it basically every boss fight in which it's possible. Oops. Well, Rosa's pretty much done. Okay, let's see if I can win before this. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm a little worried about Rose's health. She's not quite critical, but she's close. That'll put Sid in critical, that's good. There we go. Now that both other characters are critical, Cecil can recover and protect them. It's a unique attribute to Cecil where he automatically blocks attacks directed at the other characters. As long as they're physical, the other characters are critical, and Cecil is both not critical and is non-inflicted with any status. The good news is the only physical attack the enemy, or the only magic the enemy uses in this fight is that tornado move, which of course doesn't really matter because this reduces character to critical. So I can just heal Cecil over and over again and just not worry about anything else. If tornado hits Sid or Rosa, it won't kill them. Tornado hits Cecil, I have to hustle. But with the boss afflicted is slow, there's no real way out of it. equip Sid because this is the last fight he's going to be in. And even though his wooden hammer is not useful in any way, I sure would like to sell it. This thing's out. This is not really a useful game, but it's really good. So I'm going to show it. Okay, now, there we go. Now Cecil insists that Sid take Rosa and run. That makes a lot of sense, I guess. I'm not sure how Sid's going to protect Rosa, both completely unequipped and with his speed stat. But it makes more sense to only lose one character instead of 3. We'll see more from Sid and Rosa later. For now, we're going to see how well this turns out for Cecil. We are now attacked by a mysterious girl who seems to be traveling in Prologue. That is probably not a good sign for our weird map. But let's see if Cecil can take Bahamut down. Well, he started his countdown, and I don't think we're going to win. So let's just take this stuff and use this move. Best of luck, Cecil. No, I don't think we could have survived that. Now we can see just a little bit of Rydia. But this is just a little diversion. For the most part, we're going to be worrying about Theodore for a while. Well, it sure looks like this mysterious girl gets around. And it sure doesn't seem like she has good news wherever she goes. And even though the giant of Babel is, of course, long since gone, it looks like the tower's back, which is probably not a very good sign. And it looks like Theodore survived the crash, but it doesn't look like things worked out for anyone else. Now apparently Theodore is the last of the Red Wings, and he now has to return to Baron, which we're going to be doing in the next segment, but for now, I'm going to wrap things up. I'm just going to equip Theodore with all that stuff I took from his dad, which as you can see is a huge defensive upgrade, and then I'm going to save, quit,